In this how-to video I'm going to demonstrate how you would distinguish between three unknown halides or identify three unknown halides. For example, sodium chloride, sodium bromide and sodium iodide. If you were given three solid samples of these, they would all be three white solid substances, salts. If you didn't know which one was which, just about how would you go about identifying them and distinguish between them? So this is quite a common set of tests that you're required to know and be able to describe. So let's first of all look at sodium chloride. So if we have an unknown chloride, the first thing we do is dissolve it in some water. In this case I'm using sodium chloride, but it could be any chloride. We dissolve it into water to make a solution first. And then we add to that solution, we add some silver nitrate solution. And what will happen is the chloride ions will react with the silver ions and will form a precipitate. And this precipitate will be white. So as you can see, we've added the silver nitrate solution to the chloride solution and we've got a white precipitate. Now what we can now do is we can add some dilute ammonia. Now what will happen when we add dilute ammonia is that the precipitate will once again dissolve, so the solution will become colourless. Now, but what is the difference between this and a bromide? So let's now have a look at the same experiment, but this time repeated with a bromide. So here is the same experiment, but this time using a bromide. In this case, once again, I've used sodium bromide. I've taken sodium bromide and dissolved it in water to make a bromide solution. And in exactly the same way, this time I once again add some silver nitrate solution. And this time, when we add the silver nitrate solution, we get a precipitate again, but this precipitate is slightly less white, it's more of a creamy colour. Now here's the subtle difference. What I'm now going to do is I'm going to add dilute ammonia to this precipitate solution. Give it a shake round and you can see with dilute ammonia solution nothing actually happens. So let's add a little bit of concentrated ammonia solution. And you can see that when we add the concentrated ammonia solution that the precipitate actually dissolves. So look at let's recap the difference between the chloride and the bromide. Both of them form a precipitate with silver nitrate solution. The chloride precipitate is white, the bromide precipitate is a sort of creamy whitey colour. But here is the distinguishing difference. When we add dilute ammonia to the chloride, the precipitate once again dissolves. But that doesn't happen when we use a bromide. The precipitate does not dissolve until we add concentrated ammonia. So let's now look at what happens with the iodide. In this case, when we add the silver nitrate, you will see that the precipitate has a far more yellow appearance and yellow colour. So let's add the dilute ammonia like we've done previously. And you'll see that there is no reaction, so the precipitate remains. And now let's add the concentrated ammonia. And once again there is no reaction, the precipitate remains. So here again we have a distinguishing feature. With the sodium iodide we once again get the precipitate, but this time the precipitate remains when we add both dilute ammonia solution and when we add concentrated ammonia solution. So let's summarise what we know. The test for a halide is the addition of silver nitrate solution to a solution of the halide. With respect to chloride, when we add silver nitrate to the chloride, we get a white precipitate. And if we add dilute ammonia to that white precipitate, it dissolves to form a colourless solution again. With a bromide, when we add the silver nitrate solution, we get a cream precipitate, and this cream precipitate is silver bromide. If we add dilute ammonia to this precipitate, nothing happens, it remains. But however, when we add concentrated ammonia solution to this precipitate, it actually dissolves, it's soluble, so the solution becomes colourless again. And finally, with the iodide, the silver ions react with the iodide ions to form silver iodide, which is a yellow precipitate, and the yellow precipitate is insoluble in both dilute ammonia and concentrated ammonia, so it will remain even when we've added concentrated ammonia. So here is the way of distinguishing between them: white precipitate, cream precipitate, yellow precipitate. And for a check, with chloride ions the precipitate is soluble in dilute ammonia and it vanishes effectively. With bromide ions, when you add dilute ammonia, the precipitate remains and will only vanish when you add the concentrated ammonia. And finally, with the iodide, the precipitate remains even when we add the dilute and concentrated ammonia. And over here is just a summary picture of the three precipitates formed. And one final thing about the precipitates is they are all light sensitive, and they will all darken and become blackened if you expose them to sunlight over a period of time. They are photosensitive. Now I hope that helps. You will certainly need to know the test for a halide and how you would distinguish between different halides of sodium chloride, for example, with sodium bromide, with sodium iodide, or any unknown halide. If you were given a salt which says, tell me which is this, a chloride, bromide or iodide, you would be expected to describe the test you would do, each of these stages, and each of these stages to identify whether it was chloride, bromide or iodide. So you need to make yourself familiar with this whole procedure. Hope that helps. Thanks.